Well, let's move on now to something which is, in many ways, equally, well, for some people, sensitive, and for other people, quite alarming, and that is the issue of funding for, in particular, the archaeological sector, not necessarily the heritage sector, but specifically archaeology in particular, in a post-Brexit world, certainly in a post-Brexit Britain. You on the Pipeline published a story which obviously we'll link to below, the headline of which was Report finds hard Brexit could cost archaeology more than a third of its research funding. Um, I suppose, first of all, I don't know, can you justify that headline?
Yeah, the report was commissioned by the British National Academies, research academies, including the British Academy, from a commercial consultant, and they were tasked to look at the levels of research funding that various academic subject areas received, and where it came from, and by percentage of total spend on research. Archaeology came out top of the league table. The British archaeologists have been extremely successful in attracting EU money. The problem is, of course, that if the current move towards exiting the European Union goes ahead in April 2019, as is probably most likely, and there is no deal to either maintain access to European Union programs or for the UK government and devolved administrations to replace that money with money generated from within the UK budget and devolved budgets, then archaeology stands to lose something like 37% of its research money. And it's the situations with classics and with anthropology, which are obviously again linked disciplines, are slightly less severe, but could still be quite significant, with between a quarter and a third of research funding under threat.
Here you have, I presume Dr. Hayworth is Mike Hayworth,
It is, yeah.
quoted as saying, if this funding is all lost following Brexit, it will obviously have potentially catastrophic implications for university archaeology in the UK. We are already seeing threats to archaeology staffing levels and degree programmes at universities in England and Wales, which obviously recently we've seen. Was it Manchester? Certainly
Manchester,
struggling
yes,
in that on that front. We and in Wales and other threats may follow. The Council of British Archaeology supports the call of the British Academy and other national academies that the government needs to address the situation urgently, and it can offer additional funding to fill the gap which will be created by Brexit. Now, I suppose, personal political opinions to one side, this is certainly an example where this was one of those unforeseen results. It's one of the things which really this wasn't really talked about, as it were. That's, when I say unforeseen, I can't remember anyone really being told, apart from a broad scientific concern about some of these specific problems. And yet, this also actually, it's funny enough, it relates back to the story that we were talking about at the top of this podcast, in terms of the Eleanor Cross and Northampton Borough Council. People they love heritage and history, but again, paying for it is the problem. And in this case, I don't remember the question ever really being asked what will happen to archaeology, apart from a general sort of malaise in the archaeological community. I don't know. What do you think archaeology's response is going to have to be to change its shape? Is it going to have to be some sort of a painful bottleneck form shift, as it were, metamorphosis?
I think there's a real problem at the moment because the schedule for the Brexit negotiations is very tight already. We're already, but if you look at the academic blogs, Twitter feeds, articles that are making it into the media, the research community is already suffering losses of staff, losses of students. It takes months and years to prepare a major research project, and people were looking at funding for now in 2017 for 2019, 2020, 2021, 2, 3, 4 year projects or more. And international projects. Well, one of the things that the EU has done very successfully through programs like Erasmus Plus is facilitate contacts between researchers and research communities. It's done that very deliberately. It enables students in any member country, which isn't just the EU. Actually, other people do subscribe to Erasmus and pay a subscription to do so. But it's all that's under threat. And just last night in the Battle for Number 10 debate, Theresa May reiterated her no deal is better than a bad deal. Now, for archaeology, no deal to either remain a subscribing partner of something like Erasmus Plus, or to have that funding replaced by somewhere else, by another source, will be a very bad deal indeed, and potentially a very damaging deal. And that's what Mike Hayworth's referring to, and also Professor Simon Key from Southampton University, who spoke on the press release for the original report from the British Academy. I think what can archaeologists do now? I think all that can be done, I think, is to take part in the debate. We've got a general election running for the next, on Thursday week. People will be voting for the government that will oversee this. There's still time to ask the candidates and ask the parties what do they intend to do about university funding, research funding, archaeological funding, environmental funding, because that's part of the package too. Because these are very serious issues, and I think you're right. These weren't unforeseen circumstances, because people who know about these things said at the time of the Brexit campaign that this would be a consequence. What didn't happen was that there was no discussion, or if there was a discussion, it was a very quiet discussion in our little silos and niches, and it got swept away in the broader narratives of the Brexit campaign.
And it wasn't highlighted. I suppose what I mean by that, it wasn't highlighted on a national level. It wasn't really part of the. Most people didn't go into the voting booth thinking about science and environment funding. Let's put it that way.
No, and in a sense, why should they? These things happen. They provide net goods to the economy. We can show that in the statistic. We provide, the research community across the board benefits people. That money that goes into research benefits people in their daily lives in terms of medical research and things like that. But that. People don't see that. What they will notice, I think, if things go very badly, is they will suddenly notice things disappearing. They will notice beaches getting dirtier. They will notice, buildings that they love being demolished with fewer restrictions and so on.
And also as well, they'll probably notice that when, for example, last week there was a finding in Carlisle that was highlighted of a Roman bathhouse underneath the cricket club, or part of the cricket club grounds where they're looking to expand, and the local councillors were talking about, this find could do for Carlisle what Viking archaeology did for York, essentially hinting at presumably an influx of funding to support some sort of investigation leading to a public attraction. That stuff won't happen. And
we were talking about Dover earlier on the Goodwin Sands, and the work there is a partnership with the European Union that's paying for that work at the port of Dover, which is in turn actually whatever archaeology is done on the Goodwins will be part paid for by that source. We live in a very complex, interconnected world, and whatever position you take on what the position of the UK should be within that world, whether it should be an independent country in control of its own borders, its own budget, or whether it should be part of a partnership like the European Union, what you can't escape is that these are complicated issues that require international dialogues, international partnerships, and to throw all those things up in the air on a simple yes/no issue is potentially asking for trouble, particularly when you only give yourselves 18 months to sort out the fallout.
Yeah. Sorry, I struggle not to feel very dismal about this, and it feels as though essentially we're in for at best, a difficult birth, as it were, of a new shape for a whole gamut of different professions and disciplines in this country, and I can only hope that we're all buoyant enough and strong enough to see it through. But I don't know. Having. I mean, my mind goes back now. It's been 10 years. This is the thing I find so astonishing. It's been 10 years since I graduated, but basically I graduated into the economic crash, and so really for all of my professional life, archaeology has been teetering. It's been very much. People have been we've been suffering, as it were, and it just feels like it feels like the people I love, the profession I love, the people I talk to every day. It's just going to be even more difficult, and that makes me a little bit sad. But
it makes it makes me sad too. But I'm a good friend and colleague who I like very much, and whose work I admire, was commenting to the effect on the discussion on the pipeline article on the CBA Facebook page that this was all far too political and everything was going to be fine, and look at the British Academy funding and this that, and this was a trumped up political issue by effectively dyed in the wool Ramona. Guilty actually. But the reason I wrote the article and to highlight the research was that I think people need to be aware of these things. It's uncomfortable for archaeologists to read. Hopefully, it's also uncomfortable for some people, at least who voted for Brexit, to read, because that they're being confronted with something that maybe they weren't aware of and wish they had been.
And
others will be quite happy with the way they voted, think they've done the right thing, and that's fine. That's we live it.
But the thing is, though, in that sense, I deliberately said before, putting politics to one side, because in that sense, we're not talking about whether or not it was right to stay or go. We're talking about what's going to happen next,
exactly,
and what's likely to happen next. And it seems highly likely that we're going to have to, at the very least, we're going to have to find alternative sources of funds. But at the moment, it looks like those funds certainly aren't going to come from within the UK. So it's going to be at the very least interesting in the years to come.
Absolutely, and the last depressing comment, if you like, was that it certainly was being reported anecdotally that Manchester University, one of the justifications for making cuts, including cuts in the archaeology department, is that they see archaeology as, quotes, a declining market.
Yeah,
for students.